I am Christine Brown, Outreach Services Librarian for South Central Regional Library Council, and my pronouns are she, her. SCRLC is one of 9 multi-type library systems comprising the Empire State Library Network in New York State. We cover 14 counties, and that's 10,045 square miles. Our headquarters are in Ithaca, New York. That's where I am right now. If you have not found it already, there is closed captioning, and that is down at the bottom of your screen. Just click on Show Captions, and you should be able to reach that down at the taskbar. Throughout the presentation, as Tawana has said, you're welcome to type questions and comments into the chat feature, and we will be monitoring them. I will check and make sure we've shared all of those with Tawana before the end of our presentation. As you probably heard when you entered, today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants and also posted on our YouTube channel. We will end the recording at the conclusion of the presentation, and the question and answer portion of the webinar will not be included in the recording. We are also sharing information about how to request a certificate of attendance to anyone who requests one. And we ask that you follow SCRLC's Code of Conduct, which I will include a link in the chat momentarily. The bottom line is be kind, be courteous, and be respectful. We also hope that you'll be totally engaged, and I will also provide a link to the evaluation form near the end of the presentation. And now I will introduce our presenter, Tawana. Tawana Hodge is a second-year PhD student at the University of Maryland, College Park College of Information Studies. She holds a BA in Humanities from the University of Virgin Islands and a Master's in Library and Information Science from the University of Washington. Her research includes mental health literacy, mental health information behavior of Afro-Caribbean immigrants, cultural humility in LIS education and librarianship, Afro-Caribbean students and professionals' experiences in LIS, and more. She has provided presentations and training focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion research and experiences for over 7 years, and she is an experienced co-presenter, moderator, and panelist, and has been invited to present to many audiences. She is a 2013 American Library Association ALA Spectrum Scholar and a 2022 ALA Spectrum Doctoral Fellow. And with that, I will say you can take it away, Tawana.
All right, thank you so much, Christine. Hello, everyone. And for those who recently joined, if you feel comfortable doing so, feel free to put your name and where you're coming from as a way to get to know who's in this room and to build community. I will also say during, I'm going to be posing questions. We're going to be using Mentimeter. And so here is the link to the Mentimeter. I just put it into the chat box. And so I just want to get a sense of like, how are you feeling? Because I know a lot of times that like we are usually going from meeting to meeting, task to task, project to project. And I know that this presentation here today, I'm going to be touching on a lot of whether familiar or unfamiliar concepts and topics, and it might be uncomfortable. Hopefully that is not triggering or re-traumatizing for anyone. But I want to get a sense of like, how are people feeling in this space? And so I'm going to stop sharing this and go and share the Mentimeter. And because for me, I'm very, when Christine reached out to me several months ago about doing this presentation, I was really, really excited because talking about wellness is such a key and important topic for me, especially somebody who was a librarian for 7 years. I used to work at SUNY Upstate Medical University. So like upstate New York, and New York has a very special place for me. And I do really enjoy talking to New York library workers and employees. It is something that brings me joy. But I'm excited. I am nervous. I just moved this past weekend. So it's a lot of things, a lot of things are happening and a lot of feelings I'm feeling right now. So somebody said hopeful, over capacity, open, depressed, out of control, nervous, uh, see, disgusted. Oh, there's a lot to be disgusted about. Tired, happy. Okay, and the thing is that somebody could be feeling several of these things as one. So it's not just to say that we only feel one emotion at a time. And there's a lot of things that are happening globally, nationally, state, locally that does affect the things that we're dealing with. Somebody said grief, busy, optimistic. And so a lot of these things are things that I have felt. I know for me right now that like grief and like excitement and kind of like stress are kind of like the things that are floating to the top for me. So thank you all for engaging in this, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, for those who might be feeling uh, stressed or frustrated or tired or over capacity, that maybe there are some things that you can take away that will help with that. So I will stop sharing this and go back to my presentation. So thank you all for engaging in that. Okay, so shifting the narrative, what does it mean to send a BIPOC library worker needs? And so for me, Christine introduced myself. This is the focus of what looking at how institutions, but also how individuals can incorporate self-care, self-advocacy strategies into their practice. For me, I am very big on focusing on an organization and understanding these systems and structures that are affecting the way that we go about existing and navigating this world. And so some discussion norms. So to be present as much as possible. I know for those who might be managers or supervisors, or maybe those who are parents or caregivers, it might be challenging or difficult, but as much as you can to bring your whole self into, set aside distractions, speak your truth, speak from I think, I feel. I'm not asking anyone to be a representation for anybody here in this space. To make space for those voices need to be elevated. And so like one acronym I remember somebody taught me was to wait, why am I talking? To practice self-awareness, empathy, and reflection. This is a learning space. Everyone is responsible for the space and words and actions. Trust people's lived experiences. Do not demand extra emotional labor or intellectual labor. Do your own research. You can ask me lots of questions because I'm here for that. Only share what you can carry, stories stay, lessons leave, and be invested in a peer and to take care of yourself. So like if you need a bio break, you need, if it's getting very emotionally overwhelming for you, like, pause, take a break, come back, really focus on yourself. Okay, positionality statement. So for me, I believe that positionality statement should be something that is used more commonly because it frames how people engage and navigate this space, multiple spaces. And so for me, I consider myself a dark-skinned Black Afro-Caribbean cisgender woman, born and raised on the island of St. Thomas in the United States Virgin Islands. So you're going to hear my accent. You've already heard it, but you're going to hear a little bit more. I am a second generation immigrant. Both of my parents came from different Caribbean islands. I'm a first generation American citizen. So a lot of this kind of shapes, for me, I didn't come to the mainland or stateside United States until grad school in 2013. Living in the Northeast, I have visible and invisible intersectional identities that impact my life. I'm a active librarian. And acknowledging that librarianship, well, the Glanfield Gallery, libraries, archives, and museums are historically predominantly white, female-dominated professions. For me, I focus on DEI content and research since 2013. And I always want to make sure that I'm using my services, my skills, my research to better further diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and anti-racism. I love bell hooks. And last summer, I had the opportunity to not only engage with her work with some colleagues about this book, All About Love, and some of her other books, but this quote just really encapsulates what I hope people are able to leave here with. Like, living consciously means we think critically about ourselves and the world that we live in, that everything is interconnected, nothing is separate. We're not just, individuals that is disconnected from the world. A lot of the things that we do and don't do affect us as well as others around us. Okay. Now, how do you define wellness? So this is a model, and there are other iterations of this model that's out there. But like this is the 8-dimensional wellness: emotional, spiritual, intellectual, physical, environmental, financial, occupational, social. And so this has been adapted. And the Substance Abuse Mental Health Federal Organization kind of used this 8 dimensions of wellness approach. And now I'm going to go to Mentimeter. And I'm curious to know, how do you define wellness? How do you define wellness? Because when we think about wellness in a lot of different ways, it is something where people think that it's just your physical wellness that matters. I know I used to think that for a long time, but thinking about the emotional aspect, financial, environmental, are you in a place that you feel like you're being supported in all of these areas? Or these dimensions. When you think about intellectual, do you have work that supports your ongoing education and growth and development in this area? When you think about physical, are you have access to different accommodations that you may need, like a desk that stands up, access to water, easy access to water, bathrooms, for your different gender identity? Do you have access to, sorry, I'm in clothes right now, but the sun and things of that nature that sometimes you might need. And so thinking about this, how do you define wellness? Okay, so let me stop sharing and I'm going to go to. Okay. So some people have said the balance of your internal self and the environment and external environment in which you exist, having tools available to use when things get rough. Which, when you think about things getting rough or getting into crisis mode, but what can we do to prevent things from getting to that rough or crisis mode, from getting to that self-preservation point? Feeling rested, safe, and able to connect with others and feel joy. And so safety is a very key thing. I think about a lot about the psychologically and psychologically and not environment and emotionally violent spaces that a lot of people inhabit and live in, that takes a toll on us. Someone said holistic health, social, mental, physical, emotional well-being. And there's a lot that goes into each of them. Feeling healthy, physically and emotionally stable, being in balance, having resources, space, and time to meet needs as they arise. And there's probably a number of times when you've either gotten to that rough crisis point when things have come up. Have you been able to have the support, particularly at work? Is it easy for you to work with your employer, with your supervisor, which HR, if necessary, to get the space or time that you need? Somebody said space, safe space, inner and outer. And safety is defined by each individual person. So what I might think of and define as safety, what is necessary for my safety, may not be the same for everyone here or who's watching the recording. Being able to find that balance between spiritual and physical well-being. So thank you all for engaging in that question. So the next question is, how does your organization define wellness? I know some organizations might have like a wellness team or a committee or group that has been formed, or they might have maybe a mindfulness session or two, or sometimes they might have like therapy, dog days for the employees and not for the students. And so this is focused on how do you think your organization defines wellness, or if there even is a definition for wellness in your organization. If you don't know, and it's okay to say we don't have one, I don't know what it is. They might have a few events, but it's not consistent, because that's also part of this as well. Because it's hard to be like, oh, my organization supports me when they're the reason you're engaging in de-authentication and low morale. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So ability to perform assigned tasks by the deadlines. Not everybody is set up for success. I will also say that. Is not prioritized, minimal focus. It is not addressed at all, sadly. And that I've worked at 4 different institutions in the 7 years that I was a librarian, from University of Utah to University of the Virgin Islands to New York State Health Sciences Library, and University of Florida. That was my last recent full-time position. And their engagement with wellness was vastly different. All kinds of services and activities, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, at least in theory. One of my close friends work at an institution where they have meeting-free days or afternoons. And so I think it's Friday afternoons, but like literally no one schedules any meetings. That would be wonderful. Being able to meet personal needs while completing work tasks. I know during the pandemic, when initially in the early time frame, a lot of people thought we'd just be home for a few weeks, and then it turned into months and years in some cases for some organizations and individuals. And when we thought about what does it mean to work from home or work at a distance, but also thinking about like a lot of these systems and structures were very ableist, because a lot of people thought you couldn't do majority of these things. And there are certain things you cannot do at home, granted, but they're also rethinking what it means to work and what does productivity means. They might have a few events, but they are not consistent. And sometimes wellness is very reactionary for organizations when something happens. Attention on discussion around work-life balance, allowing for remote work days, which I'm curious now, and you can, if you feel comfortable putting it in the chat box, but how many organizations, does your organization that you work at allow for you to do remote work? And if so, how many days? Because I know some institutions you get 2 days, you get 1 day, and I particularly for people who are in the job market, that's becoming more of a benefit that they're looking for, to have like remote work. Our organization does not offer a definition that supports wellness and policies and actions. And so that means that they've codified it in a structure, which is great. And hopefully it's something ongoing. They try, and in many ways, which is trying is sometimes better than not doing anything at all. And so no, okay. An organization does not have remote work for certain people, and it is hard. Oh gosh. 3 office days, 2 remote days. Okay. Oh, each supervisor, that's interesting. Huh. Okay. As you all can see, if you have access to the chat box, for some people, it is 3 office days, 2 remote, 30% remote is allowed. It's dependent on the supervisor. For some, it's like as needed or as wanted basis, and some is no. And so you can see that there's no hard or fast rules or anything that is across the board. But even thinking about how is that, what does that mean equitably when we think about remote work? All right, so thank you all for answering my questions. And then I am going to go back to my presentation. So the next question to you all, this is not a Mentimeter, but you can feel free to put it in the chat box. either to the group or just to me, whatever you feel comfortable doing. But how many terms are you familiar with? So cultural isolation, racial battle fatigue, tokenism, emotional labor, race lighting, white fragility, white supremacy culture, glass cliff, colorism, de-authentication, vocational awe, and cultural taxation. So I'm not going to go and define all of these because then that would take up like the next 15 minutes of this presentation. But I will talk about a few of them. So de-authentication, so Katrina Davis Kendrick, who is phenomenal. And if you don't know her, I highly suggest you read her work. A lot of her work is focused on like low morale experiences of library workers. She's done research studies on academic, public, BIPOC library workers. And so de-authentication is essentially thinking of like you having to peel off aspects of yourself or to deny aspects of yourself showing up at work. So for instance, you may not, you might change how you dress. You may code switch. So speaking like standard English, or trying to suppress if you have a thick accent. It could be you not bringing certain foods to work because some people might think that it is smelly or it doesn't look good. It could be a number of different things. For me, I used to engage in de-authentication. For one, it was code switching. A lot of the times I felt like if I was to speak in my virginal Creole or with a thicker accent that people wouldn't understand me or they would ask me to repeat certain words like I'm here to perform for them. And as well as thinking about like not wearing color or not wearing certain hairstyles. I used to think like wearing something like this would be like just too much or nails, there's a lot of things. Tokenism is being the one and only one of you, and essentially being that person is every search committee for that diversity perspective, being that person that is like in every brochure or on the homepage, or that person that is meant to represent the marginalized or underrepresented perspective a lot of the times. And then racial battle fatigue, Dr. Smith at the University of Utah came up with this concept. And so it is essentially the ongoing effects of dealing with either tokenism, if you're a person of color, and that kind of like exhaustion. Is very similar to weathering by Geronius, where it's like this, where the weathering is that like externally you may not feel the impact, but internally it is like you're aging much quicker. And you are developing things like hypertension, or et cetera. And so these are some of the things, and you will also get a copy. I will send Christine a copy of my slide deck. And so very encourage you all to go and look at these other concepts and terms as well, because these are things that I've had experienced either sometimes simultaneously or sometimes just one or two in my career. Even now, as I am in my doctoral program, there are certain things where for me, I'm the only Black female PhD student in my cohort. There's 19 of us. And so there's certain things where I think about when I'm the only one in certain spaces, why am I the only one? And what is it that got me to where I am right now? So, all right, systemic and structural inequities. So this has been over several years to kind of get to this point where you see this very long list. And if there's anything missing, feel free to add it to the chat box. And so racism, sexism, classism, sizeism, ableism, ethnocentrism, anti-Semitism, ageism, colorism, homophobia, Islamophobia, xenophobia, transphobia. If there's anything you don't know, feel free to also put it into the chat box. I can like define it. Transphobia, queerphobia, anti-immigration, settler colonialism, anti-intellectualism, heterocentrism, imperialism, anti-indigeneity, misogyny, anti-Blackness, and anti-Asian. Whew, that is a long list. And these are things that are intertwined. So when we think about the US, and so the United States of America, because that is the culture, part of the culture I was born and raised into, Caribbean is very unique. US culture in the Caribbean is very interesting, but even coming to the mainland, thinking about a lot of times that I wasn't conscious of my race as much as I am now, particularly in the last 5 to 10 years. Thinking about sexism, thinking about classism and sexism. I'm not not small by any means. Also thinking about the rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Blackness and anti-Asian hatred now. And so a lot of you all, this is very familiar. This is your day-to-day. This is your life. This is the lives of people you work with. This is the lives of people that you are serving and working alongside in many different ways. These are your supervisors. These are a lot of people. These are the things that they are having to deal with. And we've also seen the woke bans, the attacks in DEI, the rollback of a lot of really great initiatives. So at University of Florida, I used to be the diversity, equity, and inclusion librarian there, and I was in that role for 2.5 years. And so I started that role February of 2020, and I had vacated that position June of 2022. And so it was very formative, but also acknowledging the fact that seeing what has happened in Florida, excuse me, Idaho, Missouri, and a lot of other places, North Carolina, that a lot of the things that we stand for in librarianship is under attack, been under attack, but it's under attack even more. And so when we think about wellness, when we think about the things that people have to deal with, when we come into the libraries, this doesn't fade away. It doesn't. Libraries are a reflection of the societies that they live in. I don't know if anyone has seen oh my gosh, it was the movie with Taraji P. Henson in it. And there was a scene, they were like working with NASA. There was a scene where one of the women went into a library to get a library book, but she was turned away. Thank you, Hidden Figures. She was turned away because she was Black, but she ended up taking the book because she wanted the book for her job. And thinking about segregation, separate but equal, a lot of these things, when we think about these laws and these policies where it was legal at one point in time for libraries to be segregated and to not serve certain people. And these libraries are considered institutions, and some communities do not trust institutions, including libraries. Even people who work within libraries are very cognizant of how much of themselves that they engage with, that they share with people. And I have had to learn the hard way who I can be vulnerable with and who I can trust, and that is a very, very long process. And so thinking about additional the existing barriers. So think about laws and regulations when you think about the people's bodily autonomy, the ability to have control over themselves, that is being slowly or in some cases very quickly stripped away. Stigmatization. So even talking about if you have a mental illness or disorder or diagnosis, even thinking about that, even if it's a physical one, there's still a lot of stigmatization that exists in a lot of communities around this. And as somebody who have several diagnoses, it is something where I've had to deal with about what does it mean to be normal, and what does that mean, and what does that look like, but also what it means when I'm looking and engaging with other people, and how much do I share. Inconsistent or no institutional support. You all highlighted this in the questions I had asked earlier. When we think about organizations and their definition of wellness, no schedule space or workload adjustment. Some people might be doing jobs for one person might do the job of two or three people. During the pandemic, there was this quick quit to just great resignation that it was coined. And even now, like I think in the last year or two, what is this called? Quiet quitting, which is people literally just doing the job that they were hired to do. And there's no expectation of you going above and beyond for little to minimal benefits or financial adjustments. There is a shortage of mental health professionals. So my focus for my PhD is looking at people's mental health information behavior. So how do people look for, use, don't use, reject, and the cultural aspects around mental health information behavior, and also understanding what is out there. And there is a shortage, just like there's a shortage of primary care doctors, there is a shortage of mental health professionals. And equitable healthcare access, reasonable accommodations, thinking about the language we use and don't use, especially within our organizations, and financial. So there's a lot of financial barriers. If anyone who ever have like a chronic illness, ever had to get like, medication, even if it is going to urgent care, emergency room, their primary care doctor, specialist, understands that the healthcare insurance system is one that is very convoluted, and like health insurance literacy is a term that I didn't know until like last year, is such a key and important things, but that does not equate health insurance literacy, health literacy is not equated with like your level of intelligence or you having a PhD, because there's still things where I'm like, I don't know what this means, and when you think about people who have to engage in these systems, it is not helpful at all. Okay, thinking about creating change. One of the things that I've come to realize, but also engaging in conversations with others and attending trainings, as well as engaging with other people, is thinking about leadership and the support for leadership and training for leaders. People feel up. People feel up. It is something that I have seen time and time again, where people are promoted because of their longevity or seniority in an organization, because of their connections, because of their identities. There's a lot of different reasons why people feel up. In my last organization, my supervisor was demoted a few days before I left. And this happened because of like there was a case against him that was building. And I'm one of those people where I'm like, I don't believe in micromanagement, and I don't believe in misogyny being the thing that is the norm either. And so when we think about authentic and empathic leadership, is being able to understand that people arrive and people exist in different ways and have different identities, and being able to support them in a multitude of different ways. It is acknowledging that as a leader, you don't know everything. I don't know everything. I don't consider myself a DEI expert. I have some expertise. I have lived experiences, but I'm not an expert in all things. I have been in a variety of formal and informal leadership positions, and a lot of the things that I try to do is to center it on the needs of those who I'm working with, or who I have to lead. And thinking about assertiveness. Assertiveness is not aggressiveness. I remember someone had shared I'm on Instagram way too much. But it is also a great platform to learn a lot of different things from. And so for me, there was this psychologist who talked about the only difference between aggressive and assertive is race and gender. So I'll repeat that. The difference between assertiveness and aggression is race and gender. So for some people, if I am speaking my mind, I'm very eloquent, etc. But for some people, it might come across as me being aggressive instead of certain, those angry Black women. And that's something that I've been cognizant of. And it's something where when I'm engaging with people who are from different backgrounds and identities, that I'm cognizant of how is it that I am being perceived? Are they listening for what I am saying, or they are listening to how I am saying it? And so there's a lot of times where I've had to really give a lot of concerted effort into how it is I'm going to communicate so people don't get lost in how I am saying it instead of focusing on what I am saying. And I'm thinking about a trauma-informed care approach. So trauma-informed care, the simplest way like I have like defined it is being able to say, instead of saying what's wrong with you, is saying what happened to you, what happened to that person. There's an audiobook that I'm listening for my research, and I will add it to the list. But it talks a lot about adverse childhood experiences and the impacts of toxic stress. And so really thinking about, instead of saying what is wrong with you, but what happened to you, because a lot of things happen to people, and those who have a higher ACE score, adverse childhood experience score, they might develop a lot of different diagnoses, anywhere from like ADHD to hyperthyroidism to a lot of different things, hypertension. And so when we think about the people ourselves, the people that we engage with, somebody who might be being loud or angry or out of control, et cetera, that there are a lot of underlying causes for that. And so instead of just dismissing the person, really thinking about what can be done for that person. Emotional intelligence. Not everybody have emotional intelligence. A lot of people need it. A lot of people need training. I myself went through emotional intelligence training because I could not read a room to save my life beforehand. And now I am a little bit better than that. Also acknowledging that there is, for people who are autistic with ADHD, neurodivergence, or as people say, neurospicy, that they engage in a lot of different ways. Even thinking about if somebody may not be meeting eye contact, I'll say in like certain cultures, like staring somebody in the eye is a sign of aggression or disrespect. But also thinking about, for some folks, it may just be that they have trouble with talking to you, staring you in your eyes. It's a very American thing to be like, you have to stare at the person deep into their eyes as you're talking to them, which is something that I've had to learn how to do. And conflict resolution. Librarianship has this not so great thing of being library nice. If people are familiar with that, if you let me know. But library nice, a culture of niceness, where we would rather be nice instead of addressing some conflicts or issues that we might have, whether it is with one another, is with a patient, not a patient, a patron, et cetera. Somebody said nice, nasty culture or passive aggressiveness. The thing is that like, I'm one of those people where I'm like, I could be my full authentic self, I would be very petty. I would be like, if we're gonna go low, I'm taking us to hell. I'm taking us to hell. But I'm not that person 100% of the time. But I'm very cognizant a lot of the times that we have to be ready to engage in those difficult, uncomfortable, conversations, whether it has to do with finances, whether it has to deal with interpersonal issues. I know somebody had said, like, I remember in a previous institution, instead of coming to me, my colleagues went to my supervisor to ask if I was okay. Now, mind you, something traumatic could have happened that could have changed my behavior, because a lot of times we operate on this toxic positivity that, when we say, hi, how are you? It's kind of like passing ships in the night. And so a lot of the times where some people would say, nice is not kind, exactly. Some people would say, hey, how are you? And I would be like, I'm here. It's a Thursday, it's a Friday, I'm existing. And sometimes people are taken aback. And some people are like, yeah, I'm here too. So acknowledging that a lot of the time people are having a lot of things to deal with. And so when people think that I have to be upbeat and cheery and have a smile on my face all the time, that is taking energy and time away from the things that really matter. And so acknowledging that everyone can I've been to HR trainings that said you just have to leave everything at the door. What is happening in your personal life, et cetera, in the world, to leave it at the door. But it is not possible to do so. And so this is some of the things that a lot of people are having to deal with. And so um, so these are some of the things where when we think about conflict, and people think about conflict in different ways. And I've had to address certain things that has been challenging for me, and I know the same for other people. But you can address conflict tactfully, respectfully, assertively, with a trauma-informed approach. And so with a level of emotional intelligence, and these are some of the things that we need, and you can get support and training for, because there's some things that we can learn, and there's also things that we need to unlearn as well. Okay, so questions for individuals. Boundaries. In the last few years, there's probably been like a lot of conversations around boundaries. But do you have them? Do you know what they are? Do you have them? If so, do you have ways to address people crossing them? For some people, it is not working after a certain time. They don't have, when I worked at Florida, I did not have my work email on my cell phone. I did not check my email during the weekends. And because there is no emergency in my world. I was a DEI librarian. What emergency is there? Writing a statement about how we're not anti-racist? Sorry, that we're not racist. That's not quite an emergency, as though like the building has been flooded or there is a fire. And so one of the things I have to recognize is that I don't need to be, feeling like I'm on call 24/7. When was the last time you went to the dentist? Doctor? Do you have a therapist? What are your identities? We all have intersectional, identities. We have identities, most of us have intersectional identities. What are they? Are they acknowledged, supported, celebrated at work? And I'm not saying just if you're LGBTQ, they're celebrating Pride Month and they have a book display. That's not what I'm talking about. Or if it's Black History Month, they have a display of like things from the civil rights era. Like that's not what we're talking about. It's really thinking about like like your identities, and do you feel comfortable in your space? What are your daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly struggles and challenges? Does anyone at work know? Does your supervisor know? Um, I have trust issues. I tell people this. For your reasons. And my current advisor and supervisor, she knows everything I've been through these last 2 years. And it's been such a bomb and really great to be able to have that. So thinking about, do you have somebody, a trusted work colleague, a buddy, a bestie, a work wife, hubby, person, et cetera, whatever it is that you coin them as, do you have that person at work? Every institution I've worked at, I've had the privilege to have somebody who I can go to about a myriad of things that I was struggling with. Do you have time at work for yourself? And when I say that, I don't mean like eating through lunch or your break time, et cetera. How do you invest in yourself at work and outside of work? Do you take breaks? Or are you expected to just work through everything? Even if they have like a yearly retreat, et cetera, is it something that feels good and like it restores you, or does it drain you because it's something that's more mandatory than something that is supportive for you? So this is for individuals and groups as well. So thinking about, do you have mentors, champions, and sponsors? So mentors are people who, whether they're internal, external, I've had great mentors and I've had great anti-mentors, people who I do not want, people who I do not want to be. And so, thinking about, and I'm a believer of like having multiple people for different things throughout your life, and it doesn't have to be the same person. But do you have like champions and sponsors, people who can advocate for you when you're not in space? Can say like, hey, you can do this, or can advocate for you even if you are in the space? Are there affinity groups on campus? There's now called the National Association of Librarians of Color, where there's ALA, American Indian, there is APALA, Asian Pacific Islander, there is BCLA Black Caucus, there's CALA, Chinese American Library Association, there is Reformer for Latin, Latinx, Hispanic speaking. So thinking about, and there's We Here as well, which is on Slack and Facebook for BIPOC folks. Thinking about meditation, reflective practice, because that's something that I have adopted in the last several years that has been really helpful. Work-life separation and workplace boundaries. It's harder as a PhD student because I feel like everything is like just work. If I'm not working on these research projects, I'm working on my own research. But even then, trying to have one day that is nothing but for me. I'm introverted. A lot of people think that I'm extroverted, and I was like, no, I hate people at the end of the day. And so people are like, they're like, and I'm like, yeah, I do. Not in the like, I want people to like not be here, but more so that I don't get my energy from being around people. So like I have to spend a lot of my time by myself to recuperate that. And so really thinking about like your introvert, extrovert, I'm an ambivert, in the sense that like depending on the situation, but mostly introverted tendencies. Thinking about workplace accommodations and mental health support, I will always advocate for it because mental health is connected to your physical health in many different ways. Thinking about questions for teams, units. Who is always asked to serve on social meetings or to take notes, organize socials? I have gotten to the point where I've told people if I'm on a committee, I do not take good notes. Nobody is going to assign me to be the secretary, to be the note taker, not at all. Because that a lot of the times it is femmes and people who identify as female who's assigned that role a lot of the times, or to organize socials. And so take on a lot of those roles. Is the workload equitable? And that is up to each person and group team, what that means and what that looks like, but even thinking about what does that mean? Are you expected to be a family or a team player? I have heard that many different times. And I was like, I have one person I don't talk to in my family. Can I do that at work if you're saying to be a family? Because in that case, if I really don't like this person, I cannot talk to them, right? I don't have to engage with them, or to be a team player. So sometimes it means going against our own values, our own ethics, or asking us to do things that even violate some HR policies and rules as well. Working late, not clocking in. As somebody who is single, a lot of the times there's this expectation that if you're single, or if you don't have kids, or if you're not considered a caretaker, that you take on more than other people. And so there's always this like sense of, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that. More, I know one supervisor had once told me to be like, if you have to work through your lunchtime, work through your lunchtime for this opportunity, you know. And so a lot of the times I'm like, where does that leave me? And so, because a lot of the times in this late stage capitalism, this very capitalistic system that we're in, I understand that like we have to like work as a contract. You do not have to be the happiest person there, but your bare minimum needs to be met. And a lot of the times in these places, it is not met. It feels like you have to sacrifice something. And there's this expectation that, and everybody's family is different. Not everybody comes from a nuclear understanding of what family is. And also thinking about how when I think about the people that I work with, I spend a lot of my time at work. I want to be friendly. I want to be cordial. I want to be respectful. Okay. But what I will not be is your family member. I will not be a team. This is not a sport. My supervisor is not my coach. And nobody is my mother or my father or grandmother or grandfather. Okay. Nobody's my auntie. So when we really think about like these things that is so commonplace, what does that mean? What does that convey to people? Because sometimes family take advantage of family members. So when you say to be a family, is that what you're saying? Is this expectation you're going to be loyal no matter what? The reason that I'm stressing this aspect so much is because even all the four institutions I worked at, even looking at the literature, even discussing this with my friends, that this is something that is so commonplace in the US, at least. And these are things that needs to be unpacked and really dealt with. Are people trained to be supervisors or managers? As I mentioned before, some people fail up. And there's some people who are really great supervisors and managers, and there are some people who might need a little bit of support, of help. Does your organization have that? One of my most recent organizations, they were trying to kind of develop a supervisory 101 about these different things. And so that's one of the things that I think about too. And if you want to become a supervisor or manager, is there a pathway? In order to move up, do you have to move out? So thinking about this. And then somebody said like the phrases to be a family team player are more about projecting an image than they are creating a workplace style. And so if it's to be a family, and that's the thing, image is so important too, and that's part of the organizational culture. Like, what is it that they're trying to say and convey, and to get people to buy into, as well. And so are there team or group-based activities for wellness? And I don't mean the like, trust fall or things of that, or things that only happen sporadically or like, twice a year, but also thinking about like, are there things that are worked into if there's regular staff meetings, or things that can be done weekly, monthly, etc. How often are leave policies revised or communicated to employees? Is there a retention policy? This was one of the first things I had asked when I was at Florida, because part of my job was working closely with HR, and so looking at recruitment and hiring, but also for me, I was very interested in retention because retention is such a big thing. And so, does your organization have a retention policy? And mentoring is not equated to retention. So some people think if they have a mentoring policy, a mentoring program, that's all that they need. And that's not always the case. How is professionalism defined and codified? I've been called professional before, and I know other people have been too. Mostly women of color. And so like and I'll pose this question to those who are here. Um, and I know for some folks that you might have to hop up. That is totally fine. We have about a half an hour left, and I'm getting to the end to open it up to some questions. But I'm curious for those who are here, how do you define professionalism? How is professionalism defined? How is it being used? How do you understand it? How is it being codified? Within your organization, in librarianship, etc. So somebody says getting the assigned job done, treating others respectfully. Because one of the things I was going to write a book chapter on this, and I was switching jobs and a lot of things were happening and I wasn't able to do so. But it was going to be about how professionalism is shrouded in whiteness. And so how when we think about mannerisms, behaviors, what is acceptable, what is not, when we think about dress and language, that particularly within librarianship, it's done through the perspective of white females. And so for some people, and for me, if I am too excitable, or if I get too loud, or seem too rowdy or uppity or other things. So let's see. Professional gets tasks done, have respectful disagreements, and be present and having honest communication. I am loving you all's definitions uh, of professionalism. And so sometimes, and so also having this conversation about professionalism is also key and important too, because some people might see it as what people have shared, but also it's sometimes is used as a negative. Um, Professionalism is not being allowed to be authentic self. Uh, ooh. And someone else says, for some folks, it means totally keeping their personal life to themselves. That has to be respecting and still feel sort of distant to me. I'm a let it all hang out kind of person, and I recognize that sometimes that makes others uncomfortable, as I do about their reticence. I'm working and learning to be more tolerant and comfortable with others as they choose to show up. I think that's important because I'm in the middle there, and thank you all for engaging. I'm in the middle where I'm always doing kind of I don't want to say cost benefit analysis, but also thinking about like how vulnerable can I be, but also thinking of what are the possible repercussions of this as well. Could this be used against me in the short term or the long term? And so some of these things are what some people have to, are these calculations, these measurements, these things that people are doing. And then also thinking about how does your organization address low morale? When we think about supervisors, managers who might be people who are micromanagers, people who are asking for you to go above and beyond, but no additional compensation, that is expecting you to manage up, to do your job as part of theirs. And so there's a lot of different things where when we think about, and Katrina's work dives so much into this, when we think about low morale experiences, our organizations, if your organization is experiencing this, is there anything that's being done in regards to this? You know, and so these are some of the things where like these questions are great to pose with your supervisor, with other people in your unit, department, HR as well. Because a lot of the times that we sometimes run on this is how it is. Because I know people have said this is how it is, this is how we've always done it, this is tradition, this is norm, it is what it is. And is it? Does it have to be? One of the great, I don't know if I won't say great things about the pandemic, but one of the things about the pandemic has shown is how fractured, intentionally fractured, a lot of our systems and structures are. And so really thinking about like, how do we redefine and create a new normal, a new way of doing things that is more inclusive and equitable. So this is something that I've been thinking about for some time now, and even in myself, how I engage with other people, even doing presentations like these, is thinking about like, what is the message that I want to leave people with? What are the things that I want people to be able to take with them, either immediately or, you know, for a long time afterwards? And a lot of it is just really questioning the things we think shouldn't be questioned. But also recognizing that we do have a level of power. And so if they brought their authentic full self, could the organization support them? This is a question that I pose to people who work in organizations, particularly people in leadership, like formal leadership positions. If people brought their full self, full authentic self to the organization, could the organization support them? I remember I had somebody who said, just be yourself. And I was like, that is so cute and so naive. Mainly because some people are allowed to be their full selves and other people are not. And unfortunately, I'm one of the people that I cannot afford to be my full self because I don't think that institution can handle me or support me, but I don't even think they deserve me being my full self. And so that's something that I've come to realize. and understand that it is okay to have different aspects of myself that I show to people, and how I engage with other people is not being hypocritical, is understanding that you have to protect yourself. For you understand what your boundaries are, what does safety means, what does comfort means, what does it mean to work in an organization that where most people may look like you, most people may not look like you. And so a lot of these things that people do to protect themselves and to protect others. Um, and so just think about that. Like if this person was to come to your organization, and a lot of people talk about um, being a good fit. Every time I was on the hiring market, when I was looking for jobs, like that's something, particularly when I was finishing up my library program, of like being a good fit. Like, is this candidate a good fit? I was like, good fit. Like, we're not talking about shoes, but I understood, and there's literature about it, what they've talked about in terms of a good fit. If the person can fit into the organizational culture, can they have fun with this person, work alongside them, go golfing, drinks, with their kids, if they had kids, be good friends, etc. And then one of the things I've realized is that no, we need to think about the people who are alongside us, but also the people who are coming in, that we want people to transform the organization, not to conform to the existing culture. Because if the existing culture was great, you will not have a lot of top turnover in certain organizations or even in this field. The fact that the field is still 86% white, even with a number of diversity initiatives, states such a thing. The fact that I have known people in the last 5 years who've intentionally the profession, left the profession. And a lot of people who consider leaving it too. There's a lot of people who've been here. I thank them so much for a lot of their dedication. But thinking about it, do people stay when if there's exit interviews for people leaving, it doesn't matter who. If there's exit interviews, do people feel comfortable stating why they are leaving? Are there state interviews? So during the evaluation, asking why this person is staying. Because some people are quick to say if you're not happy here, leave. But for some people, it is familial obligations, it is financial reason, a whole host of things. So or people want to stay because the institution is very supportive, but it might be a coworker or supervisor, etc., that might be impacting them from being able to stay. I have used my exit interviews as a way for me to, like, it was a therapy session. I used it as a way to say, these are some of the things that have harmed me and things that needs to be addressed in this organization. Because I think about me leaving and somebody else who's coming here to hopefully make it a better place for the next person. Because I feel comfortable doing so, because I'm like, I'm not coming back to this institution, or I don't need anything from my supervisor, or etc. So I feel comfortable using that as an opportunity, And so, as somebody said, leaving is not an option, and it isn't. And so when it's not an option, what other things can be done to change the organization? And the organization has to be willing to change itself, which means people have to be willing to change as well. And so with that, I want to say thank you for everyone here for engaging in this presentation. I want to make sure that there is time for a lot of the hard and challenging questions you all have probably been thinking about to ask me. And feel free to reach out to me. I may not be the most communicative right now, just because I'm like getting everything wrapped up with like my new place. But yes, definitely reach out to me. And there is the Mentimeter. If you want to, you can put the questions in the chat box. You can use Mentimeter, whatever you feel comfortable doing so. So here are my references and some resources, which I will drop in the link to the handout. What do you want? So I'm going to start sharing. You all can see me. Okay.
Great. Thank you for an excellent presentation.